I mean, you hear your kid has cancer, or you hear that your baby that you prayed for so long and was just born has a 50% chance of dying. And it can be easy to feel hopeless,
Yes.
but we actually never were
Oh,
because we have such faith in life after this life, in
yes.
heaven, in eternal life. And whenever we were really scared, we didn't want to go there in our mind, but we would be like, if the absolute worst case scenario happens, if we lose him, we know that we'll see him again.
I am Lisa Roers, former executive coach turned podcaster and digital course creator. Just a few years ago, my typically unwavering optimism was put to the test when my autoimmune system went sideways and handcuffed my dreams to positively impact the world. Fast forward, though, through years of failed experiments, dozens of doctors, and countless hours of research, and I am now a healthy, thriving CEO of a business that is positively impacting the world by empowering people to exchange fear for fortitude and dis-ease for durability. I created the Sunshine Cafe podcast to give you strategies to be your best self-advocate so you can focus on the things which light you up. If you're looking for hope and encouragement to live a life you love, then you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Sunshine Cafe. Today, I'm sharing with you my conversation with Becca Ingersoll. Becca and her husband have navigated some really unexpectedly hard things in the most grace-filled, faith-filled way, and it continues to inspire me. This episode began actually just as a chat that I was having with my friend Becca, and we decided kind of mid-conversation to just record it and turn it into an episode because there were just so many rich truths and hopes that were woven into the conversation that I thought it would really resonate with you as well. In this episode, Becca is sharing how she and her husband Josh found joy in the midst of her family's trials, including the years that she battled with infertility, the unknowns of having two preemie NICU babies. Yes, not one, but two preemie NICU babies, and the emotional tsunami that came when she learned that their son, who was already diagnosed with cerebral palsy, was also diagnosed with leukemia. In her own words, Becca defines herself as a daughter of God, a wife, and a twin mom who has chosen to focus on blessings in life, even when life is really hard. She's a writer, a blogger, a podcaster, and an activist who's passionate about helping others who are walking a similar path. She wants to make sure that they know that they're not alone. Her battles have armed her with firsthand knowledge of how to lift others out of the trenches, and she's just so very good at it. So let's dive into this conversation with my friend, Becca Ingersoll. Hey, everybody. I'm so excited to have my friend here on the show today. Her name is Becca, and you're going to love her. Becca and I were just kind of chit-chatting a second ago here, and I thought, we should just record this because we have so many fun things that we're talking about that I think our listeners would really enjoy. So Becca has two beautiful sons, twin boys, Lincoln and Logan, and they are 6 years old and so fun. My goodness, motherhood just brings so much joy into our life and some surprises along the way, right?
Definitely.
So we're going to learn later a little bit about some of the surprises that Becca had in her motherhood journey. Super in alignment with what we do here at Sunshine Cafe because we're here about just trying to give people encouragement. We all face trials. We all go through hard stuff. And so it's nice to hear how someone else did that and what kinds of things got you through it and what kinds of strategies and tips and ideas that others might be able to use along the way. Let's dive into your story there, Becca.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about your family, your beautiful sons, your husband, your life, and help our listeners understand your joy and how you found that through your trials.
Definitely. So I guess I'll start with meeting my husband. So we met at college. I live in Utah and we met at Utah State University. So he's my college sweetheart. We got married back almost 18 years ago. And we were really good friends before we started dating and have just always been best friends since then.
That's fantastic. Not everybody can say that. That's
That's
beautiful.
true.
That's a sign
That's
of a
true.
wonderful marriage if you can still be best friends.
I'm So blessed to have him. Definitely a rock. We talk about how the trials that we've been through, not everyone gets this, but it's been so convenient that God blesses us that whenever one of us is like in a low, the other one can help raise the other up. Like yeah, we've been through some rough things, but we've always been there to support each other, and luckily never been at the same time at a low. So
That's good.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
We always wanted kids, but we struggled with infertility. So we waited 5 years before we started trying. We wanted to kind of get established a little bit and just enjoy being together and traveling and figuring out our careers a little bit. I was originally a teacher, so I taught and I was a school librarian as well back in the day.
Mhm.
But we tried to conceive for 5 years before we were successful. So we were married for 5 years before we started trying. Then there was another 5 years where we were trying and
Wow.
eventually got pregnant with our twin boys on our fourth IUI. So if that one hadn't worked, we would have moved on to IVF. But we, once again, were blessed and didn't have to take that next step.
Yeah, but those had to be very difficult 10 years of waiting, right?
It was a
Hard
long
waiting.
time. Yeah, and part of my memoir is about that infertility journey, and um, we're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it's a very family-centric religion, and both of our families are big, so there was a lot of seeing babies being born right and left with friends and family, and going to church and having a lot of conversations talking about how important family and having children was, and it was like, that's what we want, that's what we're praying for, but we
Yeah.
aren't blessed with it. So yeah, it was tough,
Yeah.
but it also made the blessing of having kids, like, you don't take it for granted when you go through all of that.
Exactly. That's a point maybe to pause on for a second, because I think, especially in America here, we have such a tendency to think we have control of our life, right? I'm going to have a career and then I'm going to have kids. And then all of a sudden this revelation comes to us that, oh, I can't have complete control over that one. There is pieces of that that's really just up to God. And
Absolutely.
however many we have, or if we can have children, and it's a journey that is really difficult when you have that longing to have a family and the question doesn't get answered, or the desire doesn't get answered as fast as you'd hope it would.
For
Yeah.
sure. So, got pregnant with my boys, and I moved to just being a school librarian that year. It was a really rough year, horrible pregnancy, horribly sick,
Okay.
like sick the whole time. And then I went into preterm labor, and they were not able to stop the contractions. So I had my boys at 23 weeks, 6 days gestation.
Oh
So
my goodness.
23 weekers, and
Wow.
they each weighed 1 pound, 10 ounces when they were born.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing. The
Yeah.
miracle of life, right?
Yep. We call them our miracle boys, and they were in NICUs for the first 5.5 months of their lives. So that was the next big trial. That
Exactly.
again, we relied on each other and faith and our community helping us. Yeah. I heard this from other NICU moms and parents back in the day. Like, you'll look back on this knock on wood, we had a favorable outcome. Thank goodness. But a lot of the time you look back on it kind of with nostalgia and thinking, yeah, it was tough, but I don't get depressed thinking about it. I think about all of the blessings that we were able to witness and just see our boys as, they only had a 50% chance of living, and here they are.
Right. Was there anything in particular? You mentioned community, you mentioned faith that got you through those difficult months?
I think I've mentioned all of the big things. So a ton of prayer and scripture reading. Like, I remember several times Josh and I would be reading scriptures at night before bed, and we'd read something that we needed to hear that day.
Mm,
Or we had a ton of friends and family and even strangers that were praying for us, that you could just tell
mm,
that people were lifting us up in our moment of need and
wonderful.
helping bring blessings and miracles. We had several spiritual moments where we felt visited by angels, when I go into that in my memoir. But so
Goodness.
those little touchstones that we could remember to know that everything was going to be all right. So just relying on faith a lot, and support systems. Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's so beautiful. I love it when God gives us a glimpse of that other realm that we just can't quite see, the
Mhm.
spiritual realm where we know there are battles fought and there are battles won, and we know that the angels are there around us. And it's so fun when we have those glimpses that is, not always easy to see, and we don't always get the chance to see them.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
cool. All right. So then you have your two boys, 5.5 months that they're in the NICU.
Yes.
They come
Yes.
home and what?
They came home and we were so grateful, but they were twin babies. It was very hard. And
Right.
they both came home on oxygen. They came home in June and they were on oxygen till October. So we had like dueling, we had to untangle oxygen cords and worry about the sensors all the time. So a lot of things in addition to normal newborns, plus there were two.
Yes,
So it
and
was
not
just a lot.
exactly the image that you thought of when you thought you'd
No,
be a mom, right? It's
no.
like, I didn't think I'd come home with this one attached to another
Yes.
machine, right?
Yes. Luckily, we are so blessed to live close to family. So we had a lot of help.
Good.
My mom is an angel on earth for sure. And she came down and helped a lot. And, we just did what we needed to do. And there were a lot of doctor's appointments. I don't think I've mentioned yet that both of my boys have special needs. Lincoln, it's not funny, but we do joke that he drew the short straw when it comes to the twins. So he has a lot of different diagnoses. Cerebral palsy is probably the biggest one that affects him. And so he uses a walker and he and Logan are on a wait list to get tested for being on the autism spectrum. So it's not official, but we suspect they are. So lots of doctor's appointments, lots of follow ups to see how their eyes were, how their ears were, how their breathing was, like all of those things since they were such preemies, micro
Sure.
preemies. And then just as things were starting to settle down, when they were like 2 or 3, we were like, okay, fewer doctor's appointments. We can take them out in public more because we weren't as worried about germs, all of that. We're starting to travel again because we love traveling and taking them with us. And in January of 2020, Lincoln was diagnosed with leukemia.
Oh
So that
my
was the most
goodness.
recent trial that lasted a while.
Oh
So
my
he
goodness.
had cancer treatments for 27 months. And as you know, that was January 2020 when he was diagnosed. So a couple months later, the world shut down with COVID. So we went through cancer treatment, having to be isolated, and only one of us being able to be with him at the hospital at any given time. But he reached remission. He's been done with treatment for a year and a half now, and
Goodness,
life's
praise God
good.
for that. Praise God for that, right? So he's been in remission for how long did you say? A year and a half?
So technically with leukemia, they consider remission and end of treatment 2 different times. So ideally, they hope to reach remission 1 month into treatment. And Lincoln was lucky and he did. So technically, he's been in remission since February 2020, but you still have treatments for over 2 years because they know that all of the tests don't detect all of the cancer cells.
Sure.
So he's been with treatment since the end of March 2022. He has 6-month follow ups now, and then it'll move to 1 year follow ups later.
Okay. All right. Wow. And how has Logan been?
Logan, he's been good. I mean, they both have developmental delays. I mean, it was rough for him to see his brother go through cancer, and he was really sweet with him throughout all of that. He'd do what little things he could to cheer him up and bring him toys and things like that. He does have some anxiety. I mean, he probably had some anxiety anyway, but it's really common, I'm learning, in the cancer world for siblings and the whole family to have PTSD symptoms
Sure.
and anxiety. And I'm seeing that with Logan for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Once you're kind of thrown into that childhood cancer world, you realize that it's awesome when you reach end of treatment, but there's never really an end. Like you're always worried about symptoms, always worried about relapse
Yeah.
and different consequences, both with the child who'd had cancer and the whole family that went through things. But overall, they're both doing great considering. Like they are miracles
Yes, in multiple ways, right?
in
Over
multiple
and over
ways.
again. Those kinds of stories, that beautiful story just tells me God has a plan for
For sure.
Lincoln and Logan. He has a plan
Mhm.
for you guys because you've already made it through so many different trials that there's got to be a reason. And I can't wait
Yep.
to see how God reveals that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree for sure. And in hindsight, it's always easier to see, that it's always in his timeline and he knows the best. It's not easy in the moment, but looking back, hopefully you can see those blessings and be like, oh, this lined up perfectly with this and this and this.
Exactly. Yeah. It's always when you look back where you can see how all of those different paths converged to create whatever opportunity or whatever impact that
Right.
ends up being created. But it is hard to see it in the moment. And how do you get through those moments? That is a really hard thing. So
Yeah.
thank God that you and your husband had such a solid foundation to grow and cheer each other on, support each other. Because I'm
Mhm.
sure there were tough moments. When you're going through things like that, there's oftentimes those conversations come out and they come out wonky and
Yeah.
sideways because you're inside reacting to the situation and the stress
Mhm.
around you. And we
So
sometimes
true.
and we sometimes forget the person right in front of us isn't
Yes.
necessarily in our head and doesn't
Yes.
know that stress, right? So
You're
tell me.
absolutely right. So,
Yeah.
that just reminds me, both when we had our boys and as micro preemies and when Lincoln was diagnosed with cancer, they have, and I think this is pretty common practice, they have social workers from the hospital sit down with you and go through things that you can expect and how they can help and whatnot. And both times they talked about the strain on marriage and the
Mm.
fact that there is such a high percentage of divorce with both of those groups, NICU parents and childhood cancer parents. And so it's so interesting. I'm so glad we went through the NICU experience together to create that firm foundation. But people have asked before which one was harder, NICU or cancer, and hands down, for us at least, cancer was hands down for a
What was
multitude
it
of
that made
reasons.
that
But
harder?
there were several things. I think the biggest one was that so when they were in the NICU, they were both in the NICU the whole time together. So a lot of the time, one baby comes home first and then the other. With ours, that's another blessing we saw. They both came home on the same day.
Wow.
And so there was the guilt of dividing time between them, always feeling like you were not doing enough for either Logan or Lincoln. There was the fact that it was COVID. And so we literally weren't allowed to be together to go through every single thing together. So there
Mm.
were moments that were really scary that one or the other of us had to experience during Lincoln's treatment. So,
Mm.
he went into seizures and he even coded one time and had to be intubated, like scary things that Josh wasn't there to be right by
Right.
my side or vice versa.
Yeah,
So
you had to
those
handle
are a
all of
couple
that
things.
by yourself, take on all that
Yeah.
stress on your own shoulders because you weren't allowed to
Mhm.
have another person there in
Yep.
the room. Wow.
Exactly.
I can
Yeah.
see how that would be harder. And those 10 years that we were talking about earlier that were such a
Mhm.
challenge for you guys to, you got married, had 5 years, and then 5 more years to be able to get pregnant. Those 10 years were really development of your marriage and your
Mhm.
friendship and that foundation that really carried you through the years that were to
For
come.
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, praise God for Josh and for that marriage
Right?
that you guys have. It's so good. And especially now as they're growing and getting older, for sure.
Mhm.
It's as a parent, you never get to choose your hard. Um,
Right?
you just, it just shows up. You just kind
Yep.
of, you don't know what you're going to get, but you pour into these little ones and pray that God will break them slowly and gently if they need to and keep them healthy and strong. And I pray that Lincoln will just stay strong and healthy now and that Logan follows a similar path of staying strong and healthy.
Thank you. I agree.
So we talked about your boys, you talked about your marriage, your beautiful friendship with Josh, and all the things that are supporting you and keeping you strong. For those who are listening who cannot see Becca's beautiful smile and her glowing face, she just emits light. She's just beautiful, lit with joy. And you have a lot of reasons not to be very joyful, a lot of reasons to be bitter and angry at God and frustrated with the cards that were dealt for you. How do you find that joy? What are some strategies that you might suggest people consider to get you
Yeah.
where get them wherever they are to where you are? Because you are
Right.
just beautiful light It's lovely to see.
You are so sweet. Thank you so much. The first thing that came to mind when you were asking the question is I was raised by amazing parents. So, my background in particular, my dad came to mind because he is such a positive, optimistic soul. When I was in high school, he actually had a stroke and he had to relearn how to talk and write again. And I actually helped tutor him because no one else in my family had the patience. But he was a school
Wow.
teacher. And so many of his doctors were like, "You are a walking miracle. You should have died. And we don't expect you to go back to work." And he was like, "No, I'm going to be a teacher again. I'm not retired yet." And just his ambition and his drive and his optimism and his faith, like he always focused on the positive. And one of his common sayings, like people will ask him how he is, and he's like, "Better than I deserve." Or another one he always says is, like, "What do you want to do with your life?" Or things like that. He's like, "I just want to make the world a better place." And so I just
Wow.
that that is a big part of it. And like I said, I know not everyone is lucky or blessed enough to have such an amazing community or family to support them, but family is a big thing and community. When it comes to community, especially during cancer, um, community doesn't have to be someone who's physically in your home, you know? Like a lot of people complain about social media, but I am so grateful for it, especially Facebook groups,
Mhm.
both with infertility and being a mom of multiples and being a cancer mom. Like I'm part of so many Facebook groups that are just masterminds. You can ask a question or you can go to vent and the people who are there get it and you know that you're not alone. And so those are a few things that helped me, and I feel like a broken record saying this, but, like, prayer and just faith. So I'm a Christian, and anytime there was something really difficult going on, I mean, I'm not a saint, like, I would be like, "Oh, why do we have to go to the hospital
Right.
again?" I would complain or whatnot,
Of course.
but then if I really thought about it, I'd be like, "Jesus knows everything that we're going through. He experienced it all for us."
Mhm.
And so he did that for us. I'm not alone, and we can get through it with his help.
Mhm. Yeah, wow, that is a huge piece of it. And I think even people who claim to be Christians and Christ
Mhm.
followers often forget that what he did was paving the way for us as an example,
Yeah.
and that his spirit that he left with us is here to comfort us in
Yep.
the difficult times, in the, I don't understand why this is happening, Lord, but you're with me, right?
Yeah.
And it's affirming when I reread that scripture that this world is not our home, right? That
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
this world you will have trouble,
Yeah.
but I've overcome the world. And those kinds of scriptures are so hope filled. And it
Mhm.
makes me, people will often say, well, how can a good God let such horrible things
Right.
happen? Right.
Right.
And anytime somebody questions me on that, I have to say, that is just confirmation for me every time that there is a heaven,
Yep.
because we have a good God. He wouldn't just leave us here on this earth. There must be something so much better, that this is just like the warm up band and like the real concerts upstairs,
Right.
you know?
Absolutely. I got chills when you were saying quoting that scripture because that is something that also got us through all the time. I mean, you hear your kid has cancer, or you hear that your baby that you prayed for so long and was just born has a 50% chance of dying, and it can be easy to feel hopeless,
Yes.
but we actually never were
Oh,
because we have such faith in life after this life, in
yes.
heaven, in eternal life. And whenever we were really scared with Lincoln, we didn't want to go there in our mind, but we would be like, if the absolute worst case scenario happens, if we lose him, we know that we'll see him again.
Wow. Wow. And he'll be perfect. He'll be in a
Absolutely.
perfect body, not held back by the ailments that this world has. And even so now, with all of the challenges that you are still working through, someday we'll get to be in heaven and they will all be
Yep.
perfectly, just exactly the way that we would have dreamt that they would have been without
Yep.
any illness or issues on their bodies. So
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
going back to what you said, I also wanted to add, I can understand the people who wonder, say, look at this world. How is there a God when such a mess is going on or when there's so much pain? How
Mhm.
can you trust in someone when you've been through so much or whatever? And I just always think, take the long view.
Yeah.
I have such a belief and faith in life hereafter that we don't know what the end is going to be like. Everything will be made right in the
Yeah.
end. I
Yeah.
truly believe that. So no matter how many horrible things happen in this life, it'll be made up in the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah. It will be. Justice will be had, and
Yeah.
it'll be worth it in the end. So true. And I really, for those in the audience that are listening, that I love that you had said that people have a tendency to either think really positive things about social media or negative. And I think if anyone is feeling like that social media is a really negative place, I would really invite them to start unfriending a couple people who are putting things on your page that are bringing you down. Just gently leave that thread. You don't need to have that kind of stuff going on. So I think if we curate a
Yep.
space in our social media that does have the positiveness, that does have, I mean, nobody knows really when you unfriend somebody. I have a few people I've actually had to block because
Mhm.
they just weren't giving me good things. And
Yeah.
I have to put a good boundary up for myself.
Absolutely.
And with what you were saying about these amazing Facebook pages and groups where you can really lean in onto somebody. And it's okay if you're still wearing pajamas and,
Yeah.
fuzzy slippers. You don't have to be all
Right?
dressed up and go to the coffee shop, right?
Yep.
So it is kind of nice that you can just pop on and reach out to a friend and say, "Hey, friend who's gone through something similar as I'm going through, how do you handle this?" Fill in the blank. And I think that can be really a resource for us. During COVID, when I was stuck at home working, the coworkers that I had who I only saw through a screen were my lifeline
Yeah.
because I saw my husband. My husband was here too, and he was an amazing source of strength as well. But just the everydayness of it, to have friends checking in on you and seeing how are you doing, I think that's a really beautiful reminder for people. It's
Yeah.
not, and some of us don't have close-knit families. Like, you've got this gorgeous family dynamic and the strength of your dad that's shown you really how to live with a positive optimism, never to get up and really to take hold of life and not let life and whatever it throws at you, own it, to be able to, you own it, it doesn't own you. So if you don't have that in your life and you don't have that kind of support system, you can find it. You can
Yeah.
create that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we were mentioning, I talked a lot about like Facebook groups and you just did as well. But if you don't personally know people, I'm a newer convert to liking Instagram because it's not quite as friend focused. Like you can follow someone without having to really know them or
Mhm.
them approve you. There are so many good people on Instagram that you can just follow and be inspired by. There was one girl who like asked our teacher a question and at some point the teacher was like, rely on my belief in you if you don't have it in yourself. And it's
Yeah.
kind of the same, like you can rely on those things that you see on social media if you don't have someone physically next to you and try to believe in it. And if you try to believe in it enough, then hopefully you will.
Exactly right. Let somebody else's energy and belief carry you through the tough times.
Yeah.
Because, much like you said between you and Josh, you guys had that time back and forth where you had to believe in him on his low days and he had to believe in you on your low days. But together, that's why we're not meant to walk this world alone. We
No.
need each other, right? So,
Absolutely.
so important to reach out and find somebody. So I'll just encourage again, anybody listening, if you don't have somebody to reach out to, send Becca or myself a note and let us pour into you and help get you connected. Because we really, everybody, myself too, I have super low days where I really need somebody to help pour into me and carry me until I can put my feet back underneath me again and take another step.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you're like me as well, Lisa, where one reason we are starting podcasts is because we want to pay it forward. Like whatever lessons or whatever we've learned that help us, we want to help buoy other people up as well. So don't feel like it's a burden if you want to reach out or whatever.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's a blessing. And I love it
Mhm.
when people reach out and ask for help or support because I am here because, much like you, my faith carried me through hard things. And if I just let that hard thing sit silently, then what was meant for evil is evil.
Yeah.
But if I talk about it and if I can help somebody else and get them back on their feet again, pour energy and positiveness and truth back into them so they can do the same for someone else, then
Yeah.
we start a movement of what was meant for evil is used for good. And that's how you take a broken world and start little by little, person by person, making things a little bit better.
I agree.
Yeah. One of the key aspects of this podcast for Sunshine Cafe is focusing on Philippians 4:8 and intentionally pouring positive and true and lovely and right and righteous and admirable, those kinds of things into our minds. And I love that scripture from Philippians 4:8 because God knew that we were going to have a tendency to focus on the negative, right?
Very true. Very
Oh my
true.
goodness. He knew that we were going to have a tendency to go there. And I think it's part of our DNA. We're meant to survive and thrive. And so in order to just make it in this world, we look for everything that's going wrong because, the things that are going right aren't going to make us go extinct.
Right.
But the things that are going wrong could squash out our life. So we look for the things that are negative. But with that said, we really had to intentionally find the things that are positive to carry us through, because otherwise this is really easy to find the negative and the complainers. We have to find those people who are going to lift us up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So your boys are 6 now. That's exciting. Oh my goodness. And they're in 2nd grade, you said?
First
grade.
Yeah.
How are they doing now?
They're doing well. When people ask how they're doing, special needs moms might get this, but you always take a breath and you're like, by what measurement are you using?
Yes.
My boys are miracles. The fact that they're even breathing on their own is amazing. They're doing well in that regard. They are both in special needs classes, but they are miracles and they're thriving in the way that their lives were meant to be,
Sure. Yes.
they're constantly progressing. Logan is since I'm a former librarian, I love books and I'm slowly getting him to enjoy them as well. He's a kid these days, so he prefers screens, but I am teaching
Well, you
him
can read on a screen too.
That's right. You can read on a screen too. That's right. And just yesterday, even. So Lincoln needs more supports, understandably, because he has more diagnoses and he's nonverbal. But his teacher is amazing. And she has a book that she takes notes in every day. And we send it back and forth to communicate. And it kind of talks about what they do each day. And I almost cried when I read the note that she wrote a couple days ago, because there was just a long list of all of these accomplishments that we didn't know if he would ever do. Like, for example, when he was going through cancer treatments, he had to get a G tube because having the constant medicine created so many oral aversions. He was just like, don't put anything near my mouth. So he stopped eating. So he still has a G tube, and we hope that eventually he'll be able to get it removed. Maybe he won't, but we hope. And yesterday, she talked about how much he ate at lunch, by mouth, and we're in feeding therapy and we work on it constantly, but some days are better than others. Or he doesn't talk vocally very much, except we can understand a lot more of what he's saying than the average person would. But he communicates really well in different ways. And he has a communication board at school. And on the note yesterday, she said that they'd read a book and they will ask questions and there are pictures that he can point to answer. And he got 80% of the answers right. So, when someone asks, how are they doing? If you're comparing, how are they on the trajectory to becoming a college graduate? That's not what we're doing. We are focusing on who they are, and they're doing amazing.
Wonderful. Yeah. And my question is, how are they doing in comparison to where they should be doing in their scale? And that's beautiful. I'm so glad to hear that. And what a great tool back and forth that you and the teachers have to be able to communicate things so you can be part of his day and understand the things that he's accomplishing there. And he's also learning, even though he's still nonverbal, he's learning independence and he's learning how to believe in himself. And, we've talked on this show before about just how important learning is. And every single thing we do, even what sweet Lincoln is learning how to swallow and eat.
Mhm.
Everything we do is learned, everything.
Yep.
And when you've got really bad experiences, you have to relearn how to do that and do that
Yeah.
with under an experience of positiveness instead of,
Yep.
this thing caused me problems before. I don't want to do that anymore.
Mhm.
How many of us can relate with that? I mean, we could all fill in that blank with something that caused us problems. I don't ever want to go there again.
Mhm.
And, it takes when for us who can pause and think about those things and go back to them and say, no, I want to do that again. We get back on the horse
Right.
and do it again, but have a positive experience. That's how we grow and learn.
So true.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so excited, Becca. I'm so privileged to have had a chance to have this conversation with you. Thank you for opening up your heart and letting us get a chance to know you and your family a little better. And I will be praying for Lincoln and Logan and you and Josh just to get everything, just to continue on this journey. And I pray that things continue to level out in a smooth and beautiful way. And yet, all of those lessons that you're learning, you're going to pour into other people with your podcast. Let's hear, how can people find you? What is your podcast again? Let's restate the
Yeah.
name and how people can find
Absolutely.
you.
First, I just want to say thank you too. I feel so privileged to talk to you. You're being in your presence. I'd say it with air quotes because we're on Zoom, but it's just so uplifting. So thank you for that and for having me. So I am on Facebook. It's just my name, Becca, my maiden name, Webb Ingersoll, and I can send you the
Yeah, we'll put
links
them
so
all
you
in the
can
show
spell it
notes so people
correctly.
know where
Yeah.
to find them.
Yeah, exactly. Instagram, I'm Blingersall, BL Ingersoll. And then my podcast is Finding Joy Through Life's Trials.
Fantastic. So check her out. Before we go, Becca, any other final things that you really want to share? Anything that's on your heart that might encourage or just be a blessing to our audience?
Um, The only thing that came to mind is that I just encourage you to take this opportunity to have so much excitement about what this upcoming year can bring and believe in yourself and know that whatever you dream or want this year to be, you can work toward that and see baby steps on you creating the life that you truly want. We have so much more choice and say in how we feel about our lives than sometimes we think we do. And so I just hope and pray that you guys can have a wonderful 2024.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Becca. Hey, friends, isn't that a great conversation? There's just so much richness and depth there from Becca and all the things that she and her family have gone through. I'm just really glad I ended up recording it because our conversation just went in so many beautiful places. So I've got 9 quick takeaways for you here. Number 1, spousal friendship. Whether you're married or single or thinking you might be married someday, being best friends with your spouse is going to set you up for a happy life. If your marriage is established on that solid foundation of best friend friendship, you're going to be better equipped to weather any storm with confidence, knowing that the storm won't also mean the potential end of your marriage, which happens to a lot of marriages. So take the time to invest in your spousal friendship, laugh together, have fun together, schedule time to just be together, to talk and to connect. If you have kids, find somebody to watch them for a night so you guys can have regular date nights. It really will pay dividends the next time a life challenge comes your way. Number 2, be aware of hidden storms. There's so many people walking around us every single day who have some hidden storm raging just inches behind those smiling eyes. Becca was dealing with one of those, a heartache of infertility issues and the aching desire she had to be a mom and a parent. So this takeaway is just a reminder. Remember, when you're celebrating a newborn, that there's probably somebody around you who's mourning a stillborn. When you're celebrating a wedding, there's probably somebody around you who is dreading a potential divorce. We do need to celebrate these benchmark moments in our lives, and I also want to encourage you to look around you and see who might need that little extra kindness while the celebration is going on as they deal with their hidden storms that are difficult, all-encompassing, and really so often hard to fully process. Number 3, spend time in prayer. Becca said she and Josh spent a ton of time in prayer and in the scriptures, and several times they'd read something that they really needed to hear. So be in the scriptures and be willing to pray for others and let them know you're praying for them. It can really be exactly the encouragement that that other person is needing in that real difficult moment. Number 4, in life, you never hardly ever get to choose your hard, especially as a parent. The hard, whatever version you might get, just shows up. But you pour into those little ones and you pray that God will break their pride, their selfish ways, their wrong turns, their dangerous choices slowly and gently to help keep them healthy and strong. Number 5, parenting matters. You may or may not be a parent in this moment. You may not ever want to be a parent, and that's okay too. But the way you live your life is an example for everyone around you and can inspire people to fight to live a better life. Becca's father was a walking miracle and a huge pillar of strength for her and their family when they were going through those hard days of raising those little ones. Becca's dad, his ambition, his positive attitude, his never-ending optimism paved the way for Becca to see hope, even in the hardest situation. You don't have to be a parent to live life like that. You might be, but every one of us, parent or not, can pour into those around us, show others what perseverance, faith, hope, love, optimism, and humility can do to turn tragedy into triumph. I love what Becca was saying when she talked about her father, and she said, when someone would ask him, how is he doing? How are you doing today? He said, better than I deserve. That's a humble and admirable attitude for us all to emulate. Number 6, community matters. Not everyone is blessed enough to have such an amazing support structure inside their family, and so sometimes we need to reach out to our community. But the community doesn't have to be somebody who's physically in your home either. Becca talks about how grateful she was for the connections she made on social media with those various groups on Facebook. Those groups that brought like-minded individuals together who were all dealing with the same issues and could really relate with each other. Those kinds of friends, whether they're online or in person, are exactly the kind of support system we need when life gets really hard. Number 7, having peace with the worst case scenario. Despite the worst case scenario, if loved ones are on the brink of leaving this world, there is great peace that can come from knowing where they're going to go when their earthly life is over. Becca and her husband have such a strong faith in the life that's waiting for them after this life, the life in heaven, that they knew that even if the absolute worst happened, they would see their son again. And related to that, number 8, faith matters. Even in the hardest moments, when Becca would be at the end of her patience and would be complaining or whining, she would stop and she'd remind herself that Jesus knows everything they were going through. Jesus experienced it all, and he did it voluntarily for us. So she knew that she was not alone. She knew that she and Josh would get through it with Jesus' help. That kind of solid faith is the stuff that makes no sense to people who don't have faith. But when you know Jesus and you've felt his presence, you can experience and feel his power working through every one of life's storms. And finally, number 9, encouragement matters. In closing, Becca wanted to specifically encourage you to take advantage of every opportunity, to have so much excitement about what the upcoming year can bring, to believe in yourself and know that whatever you dream or want this year to be, you can work toward that, and your consistency will bring baby steps of success, bringing you step by step closer to the life that you truly want. Thanks, Becca, for the great encouragement. Thank you so much for listening or watching today. Will you please pause for a second right now, find the subscribe or follow button, and follow this podcast or subscribe to it so you can get more tips and encouragement in the coming days, and share it with your friends and family and let them know how to find us. Thank you for listening. God bless, and we'll see you back here next week.